The first morning is the hardest. Not because of the obvious things, not because of the empty bed or the untouched bowl or the leash hanging by the door that nobody needs anymore. It's the sounds, or rather, the absence of them. The specific, particular sounds that you never once consciously noticed while they were alive, because they were just the background of your life. The soundtrack you didn't know you were listening to until it stopped. The way they breathed in the next room. The sound of their nails on the floor when they came to find you. The small movements and adjustments and sighs that filled the ordinary hours of an ordinary day. And now, nothing. Not peaceful nothing, not quiet nothing. A nothing that has weight. A nothing that sits in the corners of every room and follows you from one to the next and will not be filled by music or television or any of the things you try to put in its place. And then at some point, maybe at work, maybe at a family dinner, maybe from someone you thought would understand, you hear it. It was just a pet. And you don't say anything, because what do you say? How do you explain that the word just is the most inaccurate word anyone has ever used in your presence? How do you explain that what left when they left was not just an animal, but something you cannot fully name yet? A version of home, a version of safety, a version of yourself that only existed in their company. You can't. So you go quiet. And the grief goes with you, underground, where all the things we are not given permission to feel eventually go. I made this video because I think that grief deserves to come back up. Not to be fixed, not to be explained away or given a 5-step process or told it will be okay by someone who has never sat in that specific silence. Just to be seen, fully. Without someone telling you it was only a pet. Because it wasn't. And somewhere in you, in the part that is still listening for sounds that are no longer there, you already know that. This one is for you, because you and we are going through a grief that is similar in nature. Before we can talk about the loss, we have to talk about what was there. Because the size of the grief is always proportional to the size of the bond. And the bond between a human and their animal is something that science has only recently begun to understand fully. Research in neuroscience has found that when a person looks into the eyes of their pet, both the person and the animal experience a surge of oxytocin. Oxytocin is the same neurochemical released between a mother and her newborn child. Between two people who have just fallen in love. Between two people in a moment of profound mutual trust. Your nervous system, at a biological level, did not distinguish between the love you felt for your pet and the love you feel for the most important people in your life. It processed it the same way. It felt it the same way. And when it ended, it grieves it the same way. But there is something more to this bond than chemistry. The psychologist John Bowlby, whose attachment theory changed how we understand all human relationships, described the deepest bonds as those in which we feel completely safe. Safe to be seen. Safe to be imperfect. Safe to exist without performing or editing or managing how we appear. And this is what a pet offers that almost nothing else in life does. They do not see your social mask. They do not know your professional reputation. They do not have opinions about your past mistakes or your future potential. They know only you, right now, as you are. In this moment. The you that existed in their presence was perhaps the most unguarded version of yourself you ever allowed to exist. And when they left, They took the only witness to that version of you with them. There is a term in psychology I want to give you: disenfranchised grief. The psychologist Kenneth Doker coined this term to describe grief that is not openly acknowledged, publicly mourned, or socially supported. Grief that exists, but is given no ceremony, no rituals, no language, no official permission to be as large as it is. Pet loss is one of the most common forms of disenfranchised grief in the world. You do not get bereavement leave. You do not receive flowers or cards or casseroles from neighbours. Nobody suggests you might need to take time off work. Nobody organises a gathering to share memories. Instead, you are expected to process a profound loss, quietly, quickly, and without troubling anyone. And the message underneath all of that, the message you may have absorbed so completely you began to believe it, is that your grief is disproportionate, that you are feeling too much, that something is slightly wrong with you for grieving this deeply something that was just a pet. I want to be very clear about this. The grief is not disproportionate. The social acknowledgement is inadequate. Those are two completely different things, and confusing them is causing you harm. The research on pet loss grief is unambiguous. Studies consistently show that the loss of a pet can be as psychologically significant as the loss of a close human relationship, producing the same grief symptoms, the same depression, the same anxiety, the same disruption to daily functioning. Your grief is not too much. Your grief is exactly the right size for what you lost. Carl Jung spent much of his life exploring the parts of the psyche that exist below the surface of conscious thought. He believed that animals, in the human unconscious, occupy a very particular place. They represent what he called our instinctual nature, the part of us that existed before language, before social conditioning, before we learned to perform ourselves for the world. In Jungian psychology, the animals that appear in our dreams are never just animals. They are messengers from the deeper self, symbols of the instinctive wisdom the waking mind has learned to silence. Your pet, in their daily, uncomplicated, fully present way of being, embodied exactly this. They were not abstract. They were not performative. They did not defer their happiness to some future achievement. They did not lie awake reviewing the day's failures. They did not carry yesterday's pain into tomorrow's morning. They simply were. And in their presence, you were given permission to simply be as well. Jung called the connection to this instinctual nature essential to psychological wholeness. He believed that when we lose touch with it, when we live entirely in the rational, social, performing self, something in us begins to atrophy. Your animal companion was a living bridge to that deeper part of yourself. And when they died, you did not just lose them. You lost the bridge. You lost the daily permission to be instinctual, unguarded, and fully present. That is not a small loss. That is a loss of access to a part of yourself, and it deserves to be grieved as such. There is another dimension to this loss that I want to name carefully, because I think it is one of the most underestimated sources of pain in pet grief. Your pet was woven into the fabric of your daily life in a way that is almost impossible to fully map until they are gone. The morning walk that started every single day. The bowl you filled each morning and evening. The specific spot on the sofa that was theirs. The way they met you at the door. Every single time, without exception, as if your arrival was the best thing that had happened all day. These were not just habits. They were the architecture of your daily life. And grief researchers have found something important about this kind of loss. When a central presence is removed from our daily routine, the brain experiences what neuroscientists call a violation of prediction. Your nervous system had learned to expect them, had structured its daily rhythms around their presence, had built its sense of home partly around the fact of their being there. And now, dozens of times a day, the brain reaches for the expected presence and finds absence instead. Every single time, a small grief. This is why pet loss can feel so relentless in the early weeks. Not one large grief, but hundreds of small ones, arriving throughout the day without warning in the most ordinary moments. Reaching for the lead that no one needs now, buying the wrong amount of food at the supermarket, waking at the time you used to feed them, and then remembering. Each one a small ambush, each one real. One more thing I want to name before we talk about moving through this. Grief lives in the body, not just in the mind, not just in the thoughts that arrive at 3 a.m, but in the chest that feels heavier than it should, in the arms that feel the phantom weight of an animal that used to sleep across them, in the hands that reach down, out of pure habit, for a head that is no longer there. The neuroscientist Jaak Panksepp, who spent his career studying the emotional lives of animals, found that the brain circuits involved in social bonding and social loss are among the oldest in the mammalian brain. They predate language. They predate thought. They are deeper than any cognitive understanding of what has been lost. Which is why you can know, intellectually, rationally, completely, that your pet had a good life, that they are no longer in pain, that you made the right decision, and still feel it in your body as though the knowing changes nothing. Because at that level, it doesn't. The body grieves what the mind has already tried to make peace with. And the body takes its own time. I want to offer you 3 things. Not a roadmap, not a timeline, not 5 stages that promise to end at acceptance. Just 3 things that the research and the wisdom of people who have walked through this suggest might help. The first, give the grief its full name. Not pet loss, not losing my cat or losing my dog. The loss of someone who loved me without condition. The loss of the one who knew me most simply. The loss of the presence that made this house feel like a home. Naming it fully, not minimizing it for other people's comfort, is the first act of honouring it. And it gives the grief somewhere to exist that is not underground. The second, create a ritual. One of the things disenfranchised grief steals from us is ceremony. The rituals that human beings have always used to mark a significant loss, to say to the world and to themselves, this mattered, are not extended to pet grief by most of society. So create your own. Not because it needs to be witnessed, but because you need to witness it yourself. Write them a letter. Create a small space in your home with their photo. Plant something in their name. Return to a place you walked together and walk it once more, slowly, consciously, as an act of remembrance rather than habit. Ritual does not bring them back, but it gives the grief a container, a form, a moment in which the loss is officially acknowledged by you, for you, without needing anyone else's permission. The third, and the most important, allow the love to outlast the grief. The continuing bonds theory in grief psychology, developed by researchers Klaas, Silverman and Nickman, challenges the older model that said grief was about letting go. Their research found something more true and more human. We do not need to let go of the ones we love in order to heal. We need to find a new way to carry them. The bond does not have to end because they did. The love does not have to be buried alongside them. What changes, what healing actually means, is not the absence of love. It is learning to hold the love without the weight of loss crushing you every time you feel it. That takes time. More time than anyone around you may understand or allow. Take it anyway. I know you're probably exhausted from listening to about grief right now, so I'll keep this part short. You did everything right. You loved them when they were here. You stayed when it was hard. You made the impossible decisions that love sometimes asks of you. And now you're sitting with the weight of all of it. The loss, the silence, the strange guilt of still being here when they are not. None of that is too much. None of that is wrong. Grief this size doesn't mean you loved incorrectly. It means you loved completely. And there is a difference between those two things that the world doesn't always acknowledge, but that I hope you feel the truth of, somewhere underneath all the pain. They were here. Fully, really, undeniably here. And they knew, in the way that animals know things that we spend our whole lives trying to learn, that they were safe with you, that they were home with you. That doesn't end because they did. It just changes shape. And one day, not today, maybe not for a long time, the shape of it will feel less like absence and more like something you carry. Something warm. Something that belongs entirely to you and to them and to the time you had together that nobody else will ever fully understand. Until then, be gentle with yourself. You are allowed to take as long as this takes. This is Psyche and Stillness. I will see you in the next one.